The life story of Napoleon Bonaparte. In the summer of 1769, on the rugged island of Corsica, a child was born who would one day shake the foundations of Europe and leave an everlasting mark on the history of the world. That child was Napoleon Bonaparte. Born on August 15th, 1769 in Ajaccio, Napoleon was the son of Carlo Bonaparte, a lawyer and political figure, and Letizia Ramolino, a strong and disciplined woman. Napoleon grew up in a large family with modest means. Corsica had just been annexed by France, and young Napoleon was raised with both Corsican pride and French influence. As a boy, Napoleon was not particularly social. He was reserved, often lost in books, and showed early signs of intelligence and ambition. His father secured him a scholarship to study in mainland France, and at the age of 9, Napoleon left Corsica for the continent. He attended military schools in Brienne and later in Paris, where he trained as an artillery officer. Though he struggled with French language at first, since Corsican Italian was his mother tongue, he quickly adapted and excelled in mathematics, history, and military theory. By the time the French Revolution broke out in 1789, Napoleon was already an officer in the French army. The revolution turned France upside down. The monarchy was overthrown, and the country was plunged into chaos and wars with European monarchies. Napoleon, ambitious and talented, saw opportunity in the turmoil. His early career rose rapidly when he helped suppress royalist uprisings in Paris and demonstrated exceptional skill in artillery command. His first great moment of glory came during the Italian campaign, 1796 to 1797. At just 27 years old, Napoleon was given command of the Army of Italy. His soldiers were poorly fed and poorly equipped, but Napoleon inspired them with fiery speeches and daring strategies. He led them to a series of stunning victories against Austrian and Italian forces. His ability to move troops quickly, strike decisively, and outthink his enemies made him a legend almost overnight. He transformed a demoralized army into a victorious force, and France suddenly saw him as a national hero. Hungry for more glory, Napoleon led an expedition to Egypt in 1798. His goal was to cut off Britain's trade routes to India and expand French influence. Though his campaign began with victories like the Battle of the Pyramids, his fleet was destroyed by Admiral Nelson in the Battle of the Nile, stranding him in Egypt. Yet even there, Napoleon's presence was felt. He encouraged scientific exploration, and the famous Rosetta Stone was discovered by his men. By 1799, France was struggling politically, with corruption and instability plaguing the government known as the Directory. Napoleon saw his chance. He returned to Paris, staged a coup d'état, and established himself as first consul, effectively the ruler of France. Just a few years later, in 1804, he crowned himself Emperor of the French in a grand ceremony at Notre Dame Cathedral. By placing the crown on his own head instead of waiting for the Pope, Napoleon symbolized that his authority came from himself and his people, not the church. As emperor, Napoleon was not only a warrior, but also a reformer. He reorganized the French administration, modernized education, and most importantly, created the Napoleonic Code, a set of civil laws that emphasized equality before the law, property rights, and secular authority. This legal framework influenced countries around the world and is still considered one of his greatest legacies. On the battlefield, Napoleon was unmatched. Between 1805 and 1809, he secured a series of breathtaking victories. At Austerlitz, 1805, often called his greatest triumph, he decisively defeated the combined forces of Austria and Russia, using brilliant tactics that are still studied in military academies today. His empire expanded across Europe, stretching from Spain to Poland. He placed relatives and loyal generals as kings of conquered lands. His brother Joseph became king of Spain, and his brother Louis became king of Holland. But Napoleon's ambition also sowed the seeds of his downfall. His continental system, designed to weaken Britain by blocking its trade, hurt France's allies more than Britain itself. In Spain, a brutal guerrilla war drained French resources. In 1808, Spanish resistance, supported by Britain under the Duke of Wellington, bled Napoleon's forces slowly and painfully. The greatest disaster, however, came in 1812 when Napoleon invaded Russia with his Grande Army of over 600,000 men. At first, he advanced successfully, but the Russians used scorched earth tactics, burning their own villages and food supplies to starve the French. When Napoleon finally reached Moscow, he found the city in flames, abandoned by its inhabitants. With winter setting in, supplies gone, and no shelter, the French army faced unimaginable suffering. Disease, hunger, and freezing temperatures decimated the troops. Fewer than 100,000 soldiers returned from the campaign. Sensing weakness, the European powers, Britain, Russia, Prussia, and Austria, formed new coalitions against him. In 1814, after a series of defeats, Napoleon was forced to abdicate and was exiled to the small island of Elba in the Mediterranean. Many thought his story had ended, but Napoleon was not finished. In 1815, he escaped Elba, returned to France, and rallied his old soldiers. In a dramatic march toward Paris, he won back the army without a fight. The soldiers famously shouted, "Vive l'Empereur!" as they joined him. This period, known as the 100 Days, was his final attempt to restore his empire. His last gamble came at the Battle of Waterloo on June 18, 1815. Facing the British army under the Duke of Wellington and the Prussian army under Blücher, Napoleon fought fiercely but was ultimately defeated. His legend ended on that muddy battlefield in Belgium. After Waterloo, Napoleon was captured and sent far away to the remote island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic Ocean. There, surrounded by British guards, he lived out his final years in isolation, dictating his memoirs and reflecting on his legacy. On May 5, 1821, Napoleon died at the age of 51, possibly from stomach cancer. Even in death, Napoleon remained larger than life. His body was eventually returned to France in 1840 and laid to rest in a grand tomb at Les Invalides in Paris, where millions still visit. Napoleon Bonaparte remains a figure of immense controversy and fascination. To some, he was a tyrant whose wars caused untold suffering. To others, he was a visionary leader who modernized Europe and proved that talent and ambition could rise above birth and class. His military genius, his reforms, and his unshakable willpower ensured that his name would never be forgotten.